When I was very small, maybe 4 or 5 years old, my 2 older sisters would read Kazuo Umezu and Shinichi Koga in magazines, and I read them too. That was my first experience with horror. I was hooked. Before becoming the biggest name in horror manga, Junji Ito was a fan. They would have a large effect on his life going forward when in 1987 he published his first manga.
こんにちは。ホラー漫画家の伊藤淳二です。
In a 2020 interview with Viz, when asked if any mangaka inspired him, Ito mentioned 2 by name, Kazuo Umezu and Hideshi Hino. This video will focus on the latter.
もう雰囲気作りという点も含めて影響を受けました。
A defining trait of his work was its atmosphere. His worlds are populated by unnerving phenomena such as his favoured crows and thunderous lightning. His stories often take place in a world similar, yet uncanny to our own, everyday features abstracted through insanity. This method is used to create tension. They take their time building up anticipation before an eventual reveal, or lack thereof, leading the reader to imagine for themselves what happened. This is one thing Hino and Ito share in common.
日野秀先生はこのショッキングな首がピョーンと飛んじゃったりとかですね。
Hino's moody storytelling was paired with his twisted art. It was the payoff to all the suspense, but is much too cruel to be shown on this platform. Through the course of reading for this video, severed limbs and mutilated carcasses soon became the topic of my nightmares. More than just gore, Hino's strong grasp of imagery allowed him to sculpt ugliness from the human form. His art leaned heavily into body horror with several characters hideously disfigured. This ugliness is the first thing I noted about Hino's art. Compared to the works of Ito, it was, for lack of a better word, ugly. I mean not just the gore or the body horror, but even Hino's normal characters were traditionally unattractive. It's quite charming the more you think about it. The worlds of Hino's manga are ugly, figuratively speaking, and his art presents that literally. There's a certain honesty in that ugliness, and not hiding behind a facade. Rather than hiding the blemishes of his characters, Hino presents them on full display. There's also a beauty in ugliness, and in many of his works we follow deformed masses of flesh whose outer appearance is contrasted by their innocence. Hino-sensei explored several different angles of horror in his works, using his art to create body horror, making use of supernatural elements to enhance the mood of his stories, and creating terror from the tragedies of real life. He was very diverse in this sense and used these different brands of horror to explore larger ideas in his story, not too dissimilar from Ito-sensei. In works like Ribs Woman, Ito-sensei would create horror from body image. Patients undergoing a cosmetic surgery to remove a rib will be targeted by a woman driven mad by an inability to achieve unattainable beauty standards. In Zoroku's Strange Disease, Hino-sensei uses body horror to create a sense of social isolation. A young man with an intellectual disability is forced into seclusion by his fellow villagers for fear that they might contract his disease. We watch as alone the young man's body slowly decays and mutates. Hino-sensei taking care to show every detail. Upon reading a handful of his works, you will begin to notice that a lot of these ideas are recurring. Ideas of abandonment, characters, often children unwanted by their parents, are forced into social isolation. Ideas of domestic abuse, family members assaulting or mutilating each other. Ideas of misanthropy. Reclusive artists hiding away from the real world, conveying their twisted fantasies in their work. Some works even go so far as being remakes of older works, as is the case with Lullaby from Hell and Panorama of Hell. The former claims to be a confessional, where a troubled mangaka recounts the events of his childhood that lead to his fascination with the grotesque. In its remake, a painter obsessed with the colour of blood uses his own blood to create, figuratively speaking, paintings of hell. Each painting represents a vignette of a feature of his environment, an event from his life, or a member of his family that all contribute towards his misanthropy. On the surface, they appear repetitive, but this cycle of revisiting old ideas and stories takes on a new light when you find out that they are inspired by his real life. Hideshi Hino, real name Hoshino Yasushi, was born in Chichihar, Manchuria, a northeastern part of China occupied by the Japanese Empire between 1931 and 1945. Hino-sensei was born to Japanese immigrant workers, but when Japan surrendered at the end of World War II, his family escaped Japan, fearing the vengeance of the local Chinese population. Hino was almost killed in this evacuation attempt. While in Japan, his father would move jobs frequently, which made making friends difficult. He was lonely and often spent his time daydreaming. He had a complex about his own birth. In 1967, he would make his manga debut, aged 21. A decade later, while working on Zoroku's Strange Disease, he felt as though his own body was falling apart. A semblance of his struggles can be found in the deteriorating Zoroku using the pus from his own body to draw. Little morsels of truth like this are dotted in all of his works, but none more so than Panorama of Hell. By the time of its release, Hino-sensei was struggling financially and professionally. Out of money and struggling to find a publisher, he was releasing books mainly through cut-rate publishers. He thought that horror would soon cease to exist in the medium of manga. He decided that Panorama of Hell would be his final statement. He drew it while sleep-deprived and heavily drunk, determined to reveal all the shameful aspects of his family. The abusive grandfather in Snake Man and Hino's own grandfather share a similar relationship to gambling. Hino-sensei's grandfather was a yakuza, the head of a gambling ring. The alcoholic butcher and father figure of the Crimson Bat painting sports a bat tattoo, not unlike the spider tattoo that Hino's father had, who similarly worked as a pig farmer. The fight-drunk brother of the Rising Dragon sees his antics landing him in a coma, like Hino-sensei's brother, though for differing reasons. These elements of reality mixed with fiction blur the lines between what is real and what is fake. Through revisiting these ideas in multiple stories, it makes you guess what is real and what is not. A consequence is that it destroys any inherent safety that's in a horror manga. What you're reading cannot possibly be real. These are just drawings after all. But in Hino-sensei's case, what is fiction and what is reality is only known to him. It adds another layer of terror and fascination on top of the body horror and supernatural horror that deeply unsettles.
On August 6, 1945, a gigantic emperor from hell appeared in the sky over Hiroshima. With a flash and a tremendous roar, it sucked up the blood of hundreds of thousands. And from inside the flash, a single beam swept over Korea, to Manchuria, and hit my mother. And in that instant, as she collapsed on the street, I sprang to life in my mother's womb. From inside the womb, I watched the bloody hell outside, starting with the sudden invasion of the Russian army, who murdered and plundered and took thousands of hostages away to Siberia. Once the Japanese surrendered, the Chinese began to take their revenge. My father was captured and nearly executed, but a Chinese friend saved him at the last minute. His name was Qin Shiming. I heard later that he died during the Chinese Civil War. In 1946, amidst all the chaos, I was born, unwanted.
Hideshi Hino was another child of the post-war, forged in the blood. But whereas his contemporaries sought to put smiles on faces with whimsical works, Hino-sensei's fascinated his fans in a more deeply unsettling way that no doubt affected them into adulthood. He's the first of two artists that one such fan credited as his inspirations, the second of which is covered by my good friend and lover of all things horror in this following video.
V, so nice to see you. And your charming friend is?
Hideshi Hino, the comedian.
やめろって言ってんだ。